This is the 18 Strong Podcast with Jeff Pellizzaro, episode number 59.
That's kind of what they see as the gold standard of these are the exercises that are going to make me better. These are the exercises that are going to make me hit it further, where it's just not true.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzaro.
Hey, what's up, guys? Jeff Pellizzaro with the 18 Strong Podcast. I want to thank you for joining me on the show today, and we've got a great guest, Ryan Blackburn from Orlando Golf Performance. And Ryan works with PGA, LPGA, Mini Tour, Web.com, golfers at the highest level. And today we're going to talk about basically off-season training and training yourself, getting in the gym, putting together your own program. What are some of the things that you should be aware of and focus on? Ryan has a very extensive history with strength training. He's a TPI level 3 golf fitness professional, Nike golf fitness specialist. He's Russian kettlebell certified. So this guy knows what he's talking about. And you'll hear me talk in the episode about some of the articles that Ryan's written, which he does a great job just expressing and getting across his topics. And we have very much similar philosophies as far as our training methods. So I'm going to link up some of that stuff in the show notes where you can go and read some of his articles. But Ryan's going to discuss some of the biggest issues that most people have when they go in and create their own program or go into the gym on their own, and what are some of the flaws and failures that you might experience, and give you a little direction on how you can kind of correct those things and make sure that you're putting together an off-season or a training program if you're not working with a fitness professional, or even if you are, maybe these are a few things that you should kind of pay attention to and see if you guys are kind of following along with these or if you're falling into the trap of some of these things. And you can really kind of tailor your program to fitting what you need to be done and how to improve your own golf game. I know right now here in St. Louis it's starting to get a little bit colder. The golf courses are in fabulous condition, so this is a great time to play golf in St. Louis when the weather is nice like it has been this week, but it's also time to start thinking about what you're going to do in the off season as it gets colder. A lot of my guys are either going to Florida or we're getting ready to kind of ramp up the season here inside the gym. And make sure that you're getting your repetitions in as far as, swinging the club, right-handed, left-handed, working on some of that stuff. But now's the time to start thinking about how to get stronger and get prepared while you're off the course. So next year when you step onto the tee box, first round, you're ready to go and you know that you've put in the work. So let's dive into the episode with Ryan. Hey, Ryan Blackburn, welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been listening for a while. I'm really excited to be on here with you.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Well, first of all, tell the audience about Orlando Golf Performance, which is your studio, obviously, down in Orlando.
So obviously I'm in Orlando, mostly working with professional golfers, Mini Tour pros, all the way up through PGA, LPGA. Work with a few amateurs, people trying to get better. And really just trying to do whatever I can to help golfers play better and feel better.
Awesome. I kind of found out about you. Well, we can exchange a few messages back and forth via email and Facebook. And I've been kind of following your stuff on Orlando Golf Performance's page on Facebook and some of the articles you've written for TPI and just some of the other stuff on your own personal blog. And for all of you listeners, I was telling Ryan before the podcast that I love his articles. He's just a great writer, but his philosophy is very close to mine. So of course I'm going to love everything that he writes. So first, kudos to you on your writing and the accomplishments of being published by TPI and some of the other places you've been seen.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's funny. I've never really fancied myself a writer, and I always tell people it's not really something that I'm great at, but I've had a lot of really good feedback from it. So it kind of helps me to kind of push on and keep doing it.
Yeah, I think, anytime I come across somebody who can relay their information very simply in understandable terms for the golfer, but also for somebody like me, for the fitness professional, when somebody can lay it out pretty easily, you get exactly the idea of what you're trying to express in your article. To me, that's a good writer. Whether it would pass my English teacher's test, I don't know, but no, I think you've got some great stuff. So let's give the audience a little bit of background on you, where you came from, how you ended up starting Orlando Golf Performance, and everything that you are kind of doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a long, winding story, but, I grew up playing all sorts of sports. Mostly grew up playing hockey. And in Florida, that's kind of hard to do. But, grew up playing roller hockey, played for my college, played lacrosse and ultimate, competed rock climbing, did everything you can do except for golf and, the other major sports in the U.S. Before I got into training. And, when I got into training, wanted to keep working with athletes. And being in Orlando, I just happened to get some golfers and just kind of fell into it. I did it for a while, just had a golfer here or there while I trained, your average, mom or dad or person trying to lose weight or high schooler trying to gain weight. And then I kind of got to a point where I was seeing more golfers want to start training with me just because of the different certifications and background that I had. And so I just made a conscious decision, hey, I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to make golf my primary focus, my niche. And so I started doing everything I could to learn about golf. I had never swung a golf club before that point. So that's something I've kind of picked up in the last couple of years.
How long ago did you start working with golfers? Like what kind of a time frame was this?
I got my first pro golfer probably 8 or 9 years ago now. And like I said, I just kind of started and I had one or two here or there. And I kind of made that conscious decision to, pursue golfers only about 2 to 3 years ago. But even before that, my certifications leading up to that really helped with what I was trying to do and accomplish with the golfers that I had and moving forward.
Gotcha. And so then kind of fast forward to today, primary population that you work with is touring professionals. Do you work with a lot of like country club amateur guys as well?
I would say the majority of my clients are mini tour guys. I have some PGA, some LPGA, all the way down through the ranks. And then I do have some amateurs, but that's not really the majority of what I do.
Gotcha.
It's nice. It would be nice because they don't travel as much. But.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, as we were mentioning before the show, you're down in Florida, so all the guys from St. Louis, they kind of travel down your way. So, this is kind of a busy season where, everybody's getting out of the cold of, the Midwest weather and things like that. But I think it's going to be cool to talk today about, what you're doing with your tour players, the mini tour guys, and then how we can kind of boil down, what you guys are doing at the highest of levels in the off season, and then what can I hate using the term average golfer because I think that the people listening to this podcast obviously aren't average. Anybody that listens to a golf podcast is a little more in tune with the golf world and a little more serious about their golf game than the average golfer. So I don't mean that as a knock, but to distinguish from, the touring pro, I want to kind of find out about what you guys are doing, and then what can the listeners take from that to start implementing into their own fitness program. So just, if you could, give us a basic idea of the importance of the off-season for the golfer and kind of how you break it up, or what's your starting point for these people in this time before getting back into the, like the main season of golf.
Yeah, the off season is getting shorter and shorter every year. So it's kind of it's hard to say this is the off season, this is in season anymore.
Right.
So it is very condensed. It's kind of a whirlwind. After such a busy year, I do like to have a little bit of downtime, recovery time. And usually that time we'll do a full screen again, because usually we don't get a chance to do a full screen very often. It's, we'll quickly recheck problem areas, but this is a time to do a full screen again, figure out, where they're starting their off season from, what's happened in their body throughout the season, throughout all the traveling and this and that. And then we kind of start again with kind of a short period of recovery downtime, kind kind of working a little bit more on correctives, things like that, before we start ramping up to try to get some more strength and power built up in the off season, because that's really where we try to make the majority of our, raw strength gains and power gains. In season is a little bit more of a maintenance mode. Sure.
So let's say, and this is a stretch because I know this doesn't happen with hardly any of your guys, but I actually had a web.com player come in today, made it, he's got his card for next year, and he was saying, like, this is the first year that he's known that he has his card, full exempt status for next year. And so he's like, I actually have 3 months this year before, there's going to be some things here and there, some qualifiers, PGA qualifiers and whatnot, but I've got 3 months to actually have an off season. And he was so excited, but he also doesn't know what to do with himself. But so let's say you've got a guy for 3 months where you can kind of produce the off season program that you would love to produce. What does that, just kind of general overview, what does that look like?
Yeah. So again, I think I touched on it a little bit. It's that, short recovery time, doing a full screen, figure out where their body is, spending that time doing a little bit more corrective work, some drills, reinforcing swing mechanics however you want to in the gym. And then I start working on, a little bit more full body dynamic movements. So not necessarily power movements, but things with more fluidity to them, more athletic movements.
Such as?
So a lot of different like lunges and reaches with light weights, different moves with the cable machines, pulls and presses, things like that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of stuff with the bands, with those, stepping and rotating or resisting rotation or different things like that. So just getting them in a more athletic place after they've been doing, just swinging a golf club for so many months, or
right.
or all the sitting and traveling in cars and this and that. So we kind of start with I call them athletic movements, just to get them kind of used to moving again and a lot of different planes of motion. And then I really like to have just a raw strength phase where we focus on getting their numbers up, with their upper body push, pull, a split squat, deadlift, and a regular barbell squat. I like to see those numbers. I think I like to see them higher than a lot of other fitness guys, but I think they're really important numbers to have. And then we, transition into power moves. So a lot of stuff with the kettlebells, bands. I do some Olympic lifts, but I find that sometimes it takes too long to teach the technique. So I think they're really beneficial, but yeah, just sometimes I don't take that time.
Yeah, when you have that short of a period of time, it's hard to dedicate that when you know that you're not going to get quite as far as you want to go.
Yeah, I just found it with the players, they generally pick up stuff with the kettlebells quicker. It's easier to teach that technique, and so I can transition to doing those power moves a lot faster. I'm RKC. I'm a certified kettlebell instructor, so it's in my wheelhouse. It's a little bit more of what I'm comfortable with.
Nice. And then probably maybe a little medicine ball stuff at that time. And then once you get closer to the season, do you start doing a little bit more? Do you kind of taper things off, or what does it look like as they start to get closer to the season? And then what do you do? What do you prepare them with for when they're getting ready to start traveling again?
Yeah, I try to wait to taper off as long as possible. So I have a real short taper period, usually like a week or two at most. Because again, those first couple of tournaments, I don't want to call them throwaway tournaments, but they're kind of these sacrificial tournaments, especially for the higher level you get. Mm-hmm. So they're okay not being, 100%, tapered down on that first tournament. And again, the plan is for them to work out all season. So it's just the intensity level will change based on where they are in the season, the week that they had, things like that. So
gotcha.
It's not like they have to stop working out once the season starts.
Yeah. So again, just briefly, when they are in season and they're doing some strength training, because I think a lot of guys, touring professionals, and I know that doesn't speak to a whole lot of the people listening to the podcast, but some guys think that when the season starts, it's like, oh, I shouldn't touch a weight. I can hurt myself, but I think you would totally agree that it's super beneficial to keep that strength.
Yeah, and that's really the only way that we can keep it. I mean, I wrote an article about it a long time ago, but I encountered some professional ladies that I was working with, and once the season started, they never wanted to come see me. I wouldn't see them until the next off season, and I'd ask them, "Well, what did you do this season?" I stretched. I was like, "Okay, that's good," but and then they wonder why they're getting injured or why their distances are going down as the season progresses. And it's like, well, you didn't maintain what we had a month or two to build up. So
right. We see that with a lot of the hockey players that come in. That these guys make incredible gains in the off season, and depending on where they are, how far they go in the playoffs or not in the playoffs, they might have a full summer worth of training. And I mean, these guys can get so strong and put on a good decent amount of weight, but then when they go into the season, they're skating, every other night at least. They're traveling, much like the PGA guys, the touring players. And these guys have to do some strength training, just to maintain what they have and what they built. I mean, they're going to lose weight. They're going to lose muscle over the course of the season. There's no doubt about it. So they're going to lose strength. And then, they're wrestling with possible injuries. So if they don't do some of that stuff, like you said, they're losing a lot of what they gained and all the benefits that they got out of that off season. So to maintain and keep some sort of balance with their strength training is so important.
Yeah, well, and it's really hard because golf is such a precision sport. If your yardages change by 5 yards, that's a big deal. And so if you're yo-yoing throughout the season, or slowly losing yardage throughout the season, how are you supposed to pick a club, or how are you supposed to know how hard you're going to swing, stuff like that. And so it is really important to keep that consistency, maintain that level.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, I want to touch base on one of the articles that you wrote, and TPI picked it up, and I think it kind of circulated all over the place. And the title was "Why Most Self-Guided Fitness Programs Fail." And I thought that this was such a perfect topic for this group that's listening, because as much as we preach about going and getting yourself assessed and screened and kind of figuring out what's going on with your body, I know that a lot of the guys listening are fairly comfortable in the gym, or are trying to go work out and do their own thing and create their own programs, and I applaud that. I highly suggest that if you can, go ahead and do that. If you're not going to see a professional, by all means, you still got to do something. So your article, though, is saying, hey, if you're doing this on your own, you got to be careful because it's highly likely that you're doing it wrong. So I'd love for you to kind of tackle the 5 points that you pointed out in the article, and let's just kind of dive into each one. So the first one being a lack of or improper use of corrective exercises.
Yeah, so it's hard because I love corrective exercises. Kind of before I got into golf full time, I worked a lot with post rehab people or people with a lot of injuries, just because I went through the functional movement system and learned all that. And even with some of my powerlifting background, it helps a lot of people in pain. And so I love correctives, but I think a lot of people either have never gotten screened, don't know what they need. And then they just spend their time rolling around on the floor for nothing. Mm-hmm. Or they just find it so boring and don't see the benefit from it, and so they just don't do it. If
we could backtrack, just give the audience an idea of what is a corrective exercise, just a basic definition.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's anything that's going to help some sort of physical limitation that you have or some sort of movement dysfunction that you have. There's not like a list of, these are 100 corrective exercises and then there's the only ones. It could be trainer to trainer. They'll have their own different set of corrective drills that they like to use for certain problems. But that overriding principle is for your specific body, what are your limitations? What are your movement dysfunctions? And then what are the drills that you have that are starting to fix those things?
Right. So I'm much like you. I'm a physical therapist, start out with my clinical expertise, and so I was working more on the rehab side, and then kind of shifted over into the golf fitness world, which many of the listeners know. But for me at first, it was like I took my physical therapy knowledge and just kind of started molding that into training, which looked very much like just hours of corrective exercises, fixing some of these things, and getting into golf positions and things like that. And I since have learned, now that I've worked with some great strength coaches over the years, that's what I was doing. There's a huge benefit to that, but I was probably overdoing it. And then, like you said, there's a lot more to it. So we've all seen the guys going in, doing their correctives and their stretches and all that stuff, and that's all they do, and then they're out the door. So I think that's an important point.
Yeah, it's kind of giving correctives a bad rap too, which is unfortunate, because I think everybody needs some sort of corrective for the rest of their life. Because your body's always changing, you always have something else popping up, and so there's always going to be certain drills that you're going to need to work on.
Sure. And then I think this kind of ties into the second point that you made, and that's the improper use of stretching.
Yeah, and this is another big one, and I think it's especially big in the female population, because they're, some of them are afraid of lifting, or they don't want to, get bulky or something like that. And so they just stretch, or guys that are really tight, all they do is stretch. And so they don't do any lifting or any other sort of different modalities of training. And that's got its own, all its own set of problems, because, if you're already hypermobile and you spend all your time stretching, you're only making your problems worse. Or if you are stretching and the root cause of your lack of range of motion is more of a stability issue and not a mobility issue, again, it's just making those problems worse. It's not really fixing what's actually wrong with you. And again, that's kind of where movement screening is a huge deal.
Yeah, if you're just randomly stretching, like you said, a lot of the female athletes, a lot of the female golfers, if they're going on stretching, I mean, they already may have too much flexibility or mobility, whatever you want to call it. And so that can be a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and that's the big generalization that I have seen to be mostly true is, a lot of the female golfers have mostly stability problems, but tend to spend a lot of their time stretching.
Right.
And a lot of the guys tend to have more mobility problems, but then they spend all their time, bench pressing or doing squats.
Yeah. What do they say? The guys should be in the yoga room and the ladies should be in the weight room, but it's always kind of vice versa in that respect. Yeah.
And I mean, obviously there's exceptions to that, but I've definitely seen that to be mostly true.
Yeah, and that just goes again to show that, there's reasons why we continue to preach that you should have somebody look at you, if only going in to get screened, just to kind of tell you these things, so you don't hurt yourself, so you don't do something improper in the gym, and so you kind of have a little bit more of a guided approach to your workout program. All right, this next portion I want to talk a little bit about, and that's the improper use of power training. And I think that some of the audience may not really understand exactly even what power training is. So if you could kind of go into that a little bit, and then why or how people are using it improperly.
Yeah. So I mean, if you get back to the basic definition of power, it's what is it?
Work over time.
Yeah, work over time. So I just had a mental lapse. I
have it written down in front of me, so don't think that
So there has to be those two components to it. So there has to be a base level of work that you can do, or a base level of strength that you have for power training, and then obviously you're doing that over time, hopefully faster. So the more work that you can do in a shorter amount of time, the more power you're developing. And that's basically what we see with all the medicine balls or the Olympic lifts or the kettlebells, things like that, or even with the bands at speed, or even the body weight plyometrics, things like that. So, and I think that's kind of the, quote unquote sexy exercises.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's what everybody wants to get into as fast as possible. And that's, especially for people that are new to the gym or don't have a lot of experience with kind of the process of getting better. That's kind of what they see as the gold standard of these are the exercises that are going to make me better. These are the exercises that are going to make me hit it further, where it's just not true. Those contribute, but it's not the only thing. Mm-hmm. You know, I've had players that have picked up club head speed and yardage just from doing those rolling around on the floor drills, just from doing the correctives. And then I have other players that pick it up just from squatting and deadlifting heavy. And then I have other players that pick it up from doing power-specific programs. So it kind of comes back to what does your body need, and are you doing that thing versus just what your idea is of what you want.
Right. I've heard one strength coach tell me that, that stuff is kind of like the icing on the cake stuff. You got to kind of have to build your foundation, and I think you even said it in your article, you have to earn the right to do some of these power exercises. If you have an unstable hip, or you've got some issues in your ankle or things like that, we don't want you throwing a medicine ball. We don't want you doing explosive, box jumps and things like that, because that's it. Like you said, it might look sexy and it might be cool to tell your buddies that you jumped up on a box, in your workout, but if you go down and you twist your ankle because your ankle's goofy, or next time you go out on the tee box, your ankle's not doing what it's supposed to do, but hey, you jumped on that box in your workout, big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can just compound the problems. I mean, again, it's when you're training yourself, there's a high potential to compound the problems that you already have if you don't know what your problems are. I have a PGA guy that I'm working with now, and all we're doing is working on landing mechanics because they're just terrible. And so, so we're not, you can't jump until you learn how to land.
Right.
So it's
great point. That's a great,
it's again, it comes back to respecting the process, and, all of the things have the potential to make you better. It's just, are you willing to go through them all?
Right. And I don't know if you caught the episode that we did with Charlie Weingroff, but as Charlie's so good at pointing out, sometimes people just they're not ready for some of these exercises. I mean, as he said, a lot of the golfers that are out there training would benefit way more from just some general preparation type exercises, just taking them through functional movements, like you said, the lunges, teach them how to squat properly, teach them how to deadlift. And when we say that doesn't mean, 200-pound bar on your back squat or, 200-pound deadlift. It's like, doing deadlifts with maybe a PVC pipe to start, or a squat with a PVC pipe. But sometimes we get ahead of ourselves, or we see these infomercials on TV and we see all the cool stuff that they're doing in order to do, gain swing speed. But we got to backtrack and really kind of boil it down to the basics and fix those things first.
Yeah, I mean, I start everybody with the lightest weight possible that they can move well. And then progress from there. I'm a real big fan of Dan John's Easy Strength program. I don't know if you've ever looked at that, but
no.
It's kind of never going above 70, 80%. It's almost like you could yawn your entire workout. It's not, no grunting, no yelling. It's just an easy progressing, pushing your 70% higher and higher. Because if your 70% is more weight, then your 100% is going to be more weight.
Right. Yeah, pretty solid theory. I like that. I'll have to check that out, and I'll link that up in the show notes here too for people to check out. All right, let's talk a little bit about, so along with that power training, you discussed the idea of low threshold and high threshold exercises and movements. Just give us a little basic definition of those as well.
Yeah, so low threshold would be something that you could do maintaining deep diaphragmatic breathing without many of your big prime movers turning on, and just maintain a very relaxed demeanor while you're doing it. So, a lot of stuff that we see on TPI, like the rolling patterns, some of the tall kneeling, half kneeling drills, even just something like breathing would be low threshold. And it's not like certain exercises are low threshold, certain exercises are high threshold. It's where do you fit? Is this exercise causing you to go into these high threshold compensations? And do we want that? Or should this be less low threshold, and do we want to keep you there? And so kind of opposite of those would be the high threshold, which would be, where you have a lot of usually big muscles turning on. Usually it's a little bit more explosive, high velocity. And we're going after more high stress responses.
Gotcha. And, the low threshold stuff it's necessary, but a lot of times we see people don't want to spend the time on it. And the high threshold stuff, obviously is very beneficial, but again, that's kind of the stuff that we see people drawn to, and they jump into it too quick.
Yeah, and it really becomes a problem when, you are going through those low threshold exercises, and you have to rely on high threshold strategies. So if you're doing something like a roll and you're getting, your entire neck is tense, you're having trouble breathing into your diaphragm, things like that, well, that's a signal of a big problem. And so that's something that we need to look at, because if you're already reverting to high threshold strategies, and then we try to get you to do some kettlebell swings or do some clean and jerks with a barbell, things are going to break down and there's going to be some problems.
Right. Yeah, when your body's getting stressed out just to roll over, it's not ready to put on the gas and do those higher powered things.
Exactly, and that's kind of where we come back to respecting the process. And then you have to, spend more time on those low threshold exercises, and, with the proper cueing and different techniques, you can start to stimulate some of those low threshold strategies to take over, and then slowly progress. Where's the barrier that you run into where you start to push into the high threshold compensations or strategies?
Gotcha.
And then we want to keep moving that line further and further.
Right.
So you can stay low threshold as long as possible.
Makes sense. All right, so just to recap, first of the five problems that we see in self-guided programs, we've got lack of or improper use of correctives. Number 2 is improper use of stretching. Number 3 is improper use of power training. And number 4 is lack of training in 3 planes of motion, or what we would call triplanar motion.
Yeah, and so this is a big one, and I guess this might be a little hard to explain over, with just audio, not being able to show things. But so you have, I don't know how well everybody knows different movements, but you basically have 3 planes of movement that you're capable of. So you have your sagittal plane, which is straight front to back. Your frontal plane, which would be side to side, and the transverse plane, which is rotational. So I would say probably 90% of our training is front to back in that sagittal plane. Your bicep curls, your squats, your deadlifts, your lunges, bench press, things like that would all be sagittal plane. Well, the majority of injuries occur in the frontal and transverse planes. Whether you're an athlete or not, you get older and you go to turn and step off a curb, your body's not really equipped to handle that rotational loading, or that frontal plane loading. And so that's where, as you get older, a lot of injuries happen. Or, you spend all your time training the sagittal plane as an athlete, and you go to juke somebody in football or something like that, and, you tear your ACL. And with golf, we really find that people err one of 2 ways. One, they kind of stick with that traditional, they train all sagittal plane, when we know golf is highly rotational, a lot of lateral forces or frontal plane forces being put through the body. So, if all you're doing is front to back, your body's not really equipped to handle all those forces. And so you end up, with a lot of excess lateral movement in your swing, the sliding and the swaying, things like that. Or you end up injured. And then some people sway the total opposite way, where everything that they do is rotational.
Right, yeah. I think that's the trend that we've seen in recent years with the term golf fitness becoming so popular.
Yeah, and so, just because we're doing golf fitness doesn't mean everything looks like a golf swing, or everything is throwing a medicine ball, or everything is adding rotation to a bicep curl or something like that. So, and again, there's forces being put through in all three planes of motion at every point of a golf swing. And I kind of listed, just a couple joints and what they do in each plane of motion, just going into a backswing. And you can see it's pretty complicated.
Yeah, definitely.
And so if all you're doing is rotation, then your body's not equipped to handle those other two planes of motion. And so you're only getting, 33% of the benefit.
So what are some, I know in your article you put a couple examples in there, what are some great exercises that people can kind of start tying in? The sagittal plane, I think we've got that, your squats, deadlifts, pushes, pulls, that kind of thing. What are some good rotational exercises or combo exercises that you guys use a lot?
Yeah, so one thing that I really like to do is different lunging and reaching patterns. And that's unfortunately really, really hard to explain with just audio, but basically, if you're lunging forward, you could be reaching your arms over your head to the left. So your shoulders and your arms are all tipping to the left or to the right, whatever. So you would be lunging forward but leaning to the side, or you could be lunging to the side and leaning to the side, or you could be doing a rotational lunge with a lean straight back. There's a lot, almost an infinite number of different combinations that you could put together. And again, it kind of comes back to the player. What are we trying to reinforce, or what are we trying to activate more of, or what are we trying to deactivate or turn off a little bit of? And so a lot of these different lunging and reaching patterns I use a lot, different ones for different players. Overhead pressing, I do a lot of, instead of pressing straight up, would be kind of pressing out to the side or pressing overhead into the side. Overhead pressing with rotation, either you rotate across, would be in front of your face, or you can rotate to the same way and press up behind you.
I like those.
And so there's a lot of different ways that we can start to add multi-planar elements to traditional exercises. Even a big one that I like to use as a corrective drill would be like a rotational squat, which is, bear with me while I try to explain it. But
yeah, actually, I think you had a picture of this on your Facebook page, and so I'll grab that off your Facebook page so people can have a little bit of a visual, but I'll let you go ahead and describe it, and then they can go and check out the page.
Yeah, so basically if you stand next to a wall, maybe about a foot away from the wall, and the wall would be to your side, you would basically turn your hips, so you turn your butt towards the wall as you squat and kind of stick your butt out towards the wall. And the goal would be to get a little bit of a squat as you rotate and press your hips out into the wall. So you try to get your butt flat against the wall and just gently tap it and then come back up to a square position. So you get a lot of rotational loading with the ankle and the knee and the hip. And it really does very similar things to what you would see in your golf swing.
Yeah, that was the first time I'd seen that, and so I was like, "Oh man, I like that. That's cool. I'll have to give that a shot." So I'll definitely put that picture up, and then maybe one of these days we'll get you on the 18 Strong TV channel on YouTube and have you demonstrate that for us, or I'll make a video for that as well.
Yeah, unfortunately it's hard to explain some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Especially when you start moving in all these different planes of motion.
Right, exactly.
This is going one way, your hands are going another way.
So let's talk about the last one here, and this is a big one for a lot of people, especially guys that grew up lifting weights, playing sports, and we're kind of in that traditional weightlifting routine that we all had with the football coach in high school. But number 5 is isolation versus integration of exercises.
Yeah, so again, it kind of comes back to that traditional, I would call it a bodybuilding workout, where you have this split routine. Chest is on Monday and legs are on Tuesday and back is on Wednesday and arms are on Thursday, whatever, where you're kind of splitting up segment by segment of the body. And again, it works really well for bodybuilders, or if you're trying to be a bikini competitor or physique guy, that's the way to go. And that's really where, all this fitness industry kind of originated from. So it's kind of stuck around and perpetuated a little longer than it should. But if our goal is, either general health or better athletic performance, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, there's no athletic event, or there's nowhere in life where you're isolating a single muscle in a fixed range of motion. In life and in athletics, everything has to work together. Everything has to coordinate together. And so that's only what makes sense when you're talking about training in the gym for athletic performance.
There's a big chain. Our body's a chain of movements and muscles and tendons and everything working together. And yes, there's a place and time for, like you said, some sagittal plane stuff, or some different movements that aren't necessarily looking like a golf swing, or looking like a movement that you do on a daily basis, but to generate some power and strength. But I mean, to get away from the bicep curls, the tricep extensions, and not that those are bad things to do, and sometimes us guys, we like to do them just because physique wise and body composition wise. But as far as from an athletic standpoint, they're hardly ever in a program in our place, and it sounds like kind of the same deal with you.
Yeah, I mean, I just see that. I mean, if you want bigger biceps, or you want to work your biceps, well, they're getting worked out while we do our rows, or they're working out when we do XYZ, our pull-ups. So all that stuff gets worked out. It's just not isolated out.
Right.
And I still have one of my touring guys. He hangs out after a workout every single time and does his bicep curls and hammer extensions.
Yep.
Just because he wants his big arms. So
they love guns, and golf shirts are getting a little tighter and a little shorter in the sleeves these days. So
exactly,
those guys that are on TV, they want to make sure they look good. All right,
so I got 5.
Yeah, exactly, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as long as you get the other work in first, then you're allowed to do your biceps and triceps. That's kind of our rule. All right, I got a couple quick fire questions for you at the end here. I know you've listened to a couple podcast episodes, so you probably know some of these that are coming. First and foremost, Caddyshack or Happy Gilmore?
Happy Gilmore for sure.
All right, very definite answer there.
Yes.
All right, if you had a chance to either play 18 holes or just even sit in a cart and ride 18 holes with anyone in the golf world, golf fitness world, whoever it might be, who would it be and why?
I'd probably go with Arnold Palmer. I live in Orlando, and I've seen him around Bay Hill a few times, and I've talked to a lot of people that have interacted with him, and he just has a lot of amazing stories, and I'd just really like to hear them. So
you might need more than just one round of 18 holes to hang out with Arnie. He would probably definitely be at the top of my list as well. All right, when you first heard the term 18 strong or came across the podcast or whatever, what did that term conjure up in your head?
I mean, getting stronger for better golf performance. I mean, one of my favorite things I like to tell people is golf strong, and so it kind of evokes that same thing. Like, golfers are not weak, they're not dainty. They're getting more and more athletic, more and more stronger. And I just love that you are helping to facilitate that and encourage that.
Thank you. I'm glad to do it. All right. What do you have going on that most excites you at Orlando Golf Performance or with the athletes that you're working with?
Sort of probably at the end of this month, I have a lot of the Winter Series pros that are coming back into town. So the mini tour guys and girls come into town usually right around now and have their Winter Series in Orlando. So I pick up a few people that I don't get to see except for 6 months out of the year. So that's always fun to catch up with them. LPGA season is about to end, and so get to work with them in their off season. It's kind of, I have some people that are starting their season and some people that are going into their off season. So this is kind of my busy time, so it's always my fun time.
That's cool. And then do you have any last pieces of advice or actionable tips for the listeners of the 18 Strong podcast, especially with them going into their off season?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say listen to as many of these podcasts as you can. Listen to it. Read. I
love that answer.
I mean, the more knowledge, outside of hiring a trainer, the more knowledge you can get in terms of what's going to make you perform better, the better it's going to help your game. So instead of just, reading Golf Digest or, picking up Men's Health, something like that, if you can really spend some time learning and educating yourself, it'll go a long ways.
Awesome. And then where can the audience find you, and where can they follow your stuff on social media?
So the best way to find everything is on my website, orlandogolfperformance.com. It's got links to all my social media, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff.
Cool. And I'll definitely link up some of the articles that we talked about in the show, and a couple of the other ones that I've read through. That, like I said, I just love your writing style. I think you're putting out great information, and we will continue to share your content on the 18 Strong podcast and website, because I think we're both spreading the same mission. So thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate it, and continue doing great work.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. So how many of those things did you find in your own fitness program that you're not quite doing correctly, or things that you can improve on at least when you're designing this off-season program? So hopefully you'll take what we talked about in today's episode and implement that into your program this winter. So when you get ready to go play at the beginning of the next season, you feel better than you ever have coming off of an off season. I want to thank you for joining us on the 18 Strong podcast this week. We have a ton of great guests coming up in the near future, including a Web.com player who just barely missed making it into the top 25 to get his PGA card just this past couple of weeks. So that's going to be episode number 60 with Adam Long. Stay tuned for that. And as always, I love reading the reviews that people are leaving on the 18 Strong podcast on iTunes. So if you've had any trouble trying to figure out where to do that or how to do that, we have created a couple of videos. I'll put some links in the show notes page for Ryan's episode here on how to go and simply leave a review. It's super easy on your phone. But if you would, and you love the 18 Strong podcast, and you want this to continue to grow, I greatly appreciate that, first of all. But it's a great and easy way to figure out how to do that. So, as always, train hard, practice smart, play better golf. I'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.